Hello, Mr. Knodel. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation to be here in our podcast. For the beginning, may I kindly request you to briefly introduce yourself and provide us with some information about your experience and background?
Yeah, hello, Mr. Dehnert. Thanks for a lot for the invitation and for having the opportunity to be your interview partner. My name is Rainer Knodel. I studied plastics engineering on a University of Applied Sciences in Germany. And I started in 1987 in a company producing polyolefins like polyethylene, polypropylene. My first position was a development engineer in the physical laboratory. And since 2000, I'm the manager for quality assurance department containing several laboratories like chemical or mechanical laboratories, as well as a technical application center. We are accredited since 2005 with 15 different methods, and I became an assessor for mechanical testing, especially for plastics, in 2008 for the German accreditation body DAKKS, called DAX. And I do 5 till 10 assessments per year. So that's in short words my background about accreditation and my experience with that.
Thank you very much for the introduction. As we have already talked today, we are going to talk about the introduction of new methods to the laboratory. I remember that it was very interesting for me during one of your assessments in Iran. You asked the laboratory if they have a process for such an introduction, and it remained an interesting issue for me since then. I'm going to start with the first question. In ISO 17025 standard, it is stated that the laboratory shall use appropriate methods and procedures for all laboratory activities, including testing activities. May I have your idea about the term appropriate in this requirement? How we should interpret appropriate here, and what types of methods are considered as appropriate?
So, well, that's a good question. What is appropriate? The approach of the new ISO 17025 standard is more customer oriented. So I would define that all methods which fulfill the customer's requirements and needs, they are appropriate. So, but the laboratory has to find out what are the needs of the customers. That's not often clear. So it's quite easy if the customer has the knowledge about that and he knows exactly what he wants. So maybe he asked for a tensile test in accordance to ISO 527. So it's quite easy for you. But often the customer do not know what they want. So it's your task to give him advice and to ask him what he really needs. And then then you need to evaluate if that is appropriate for your laboratory itself. So you have to think about, are we able to do this method? Do we have the resources, and is it worthwhile to perform the test? Well, we will come back to this item later, but you have to look what is appropriate for the customer and what is appropriate for you. And so if you think you're able to do that, but it's just one test per year, then it's not appropriate for you to perform this test. You have to look, is it worthwhile? How much effort I have to invest for that? And so you have to look, what are you able to do? So that, I think, is the definition of appropriate in the sense of the ISO standard.
Based on your response, in many cases, the customer does not provide us with sufficient information about the test methods that they need. They only need some tests to be done, and we should define if the selected method is appropriate or not. Yeah. My next question is that what factors need to be considered when we ourselves are going to select the test methods? There are some performance-related factors, such as how precise our method is, if it has a significant bias or not, and similar characteristics. And there are some business related factors concerning time and money. If it is a time consuming method, if it is too expensive to perform such a method. And typically we need to find a balance between two types of factors. Could you please let us know how we should keep this balance? How should we find this optimized point considering these two types of factors?
So, well, that's quite difficult to find these balance. It depends on your factors in the laboratory. But you're indeed you're right. There are performance and business related factors which both has to be considered. At first, you have to differentiate or to distinguish if you have a new method based on a standard, on a national or international standard, or would you like to use a self-developed procedure? That is the first thing you have to think about. If you select a standardized procedure, the performance factors are usually described in the standard, so you don't have to do that. There is the bias, there is a precision, and so on. That's normally described in the standard, and so you don't have to worry about that. You just have to verify if you are able to do that. So you don't need to validate it, you just to make a verification if you are able to do that. It's much more difficult if you use a self-developed method. There are, I will refer to the interview with Lawrence Sibison. He made some interesting comments about validation and verification, and that's really necessary to introduce a new method. And there you have to watch all performance parameters like precision, bias, detection limits, resolution, selectivity, and so on, what is necessary. And that could be a lot of effort if you have a complex method like HPLC or GPC or GCMS. That are methods where you have to consider all these factors, and that could be a lot of work. Then you have a report about 30, 40 pages for that. Mm-hmm. So the business factors are completely different. You have to evaluate if you have the capability to perform this test under acceptable conditions. What is acceptable for the customer and what is acceptable for you. I mentioned it before. There are some other aspects you have to consider. How many tests I will do per year? Is it only one per year or two, or do I have it to do every day? Do I have a well-trained and educated staff? Do I have people who can do this test, who can perform this test? Do I have the equipment to perform this test properly, or do I have to purchase it before? Am I able to fulfill the customer's needs regarding the response time, the costs, reporting of results, etc.? And what is the effort to establish the method? And last not least, but how important is the customer for you? Is it a key player, or is it just a request from a single customer never heard before? That is important, that all these things you have all to keep in balance, and you have to make the decision: is it worthwhile for you to introduce a new customer? Will you earn some money with that, or is it just work? Is it work in the future? Maybe it will become a key player, a good customer. That what all you have all to evaluate.
And this customer focus approach in ISO 17025, I think supports this idea that you should take care of your customers and see what is appropriate for them when selecting a test method. And you mentioned that if you have a key customer, you should be more careful about this. Thank you very much.
It is really important to know the needs of the customer. Some knows exactly what they want, but some do not know. They just have a part, and I need to fulfill their customers' requests and needs, but they are not really familiar with the test methods and what a laboratory can find for values. what will be a test report, what physical data are inside. And that's the task of a competent laboratory, to give advice to the customer and explain exactly what he can expect, what he has to pay for that, how long it needs, what's the effort of that. So I'm a really clear and open discussion with the customer is necessary to avoid any conflicts later on. That I would recommend, to have a clear discussion with the customer to see if I can fulfill its needs.
And it's a difficult job. Sometimes our customers are not technically competent to talk about technical details. Yes.
Yeah, that's a challenge. Yeah. But it's important, and that's a necessary and a fundamental task of the laboratory, of a competent laboratory, which is accredited, to find out and to give advice what's the needs of the customers are.
Okay, let's imagine that we have already selected the test method, and now we would like to apply the test method in my laboratory. Could you describe the steps the lab should take when they want to apply a new test method in the laboratory, considering ISO 17025 requirements?
Well, as I mentioned before, you have to look if you have suitable equipment. Do I have a tensile machine or an impact tester or something else? If so, it's much easier. If not, I have to look if I can purchase it. Do I have trainee employees, maybe laboratory assistants with physical background or chemical background? The business key factors, as mentioned before, like cost, response time, number of requested tests, and so on. Do I have the sample logistics? So the income, can I distribute them? Can I mark them? That's necessary. And do I have appropriate place and room, like an air-conditioned room, if it's necessary to store them, if I have a storage area with standard temperature and humidity. That's at first what you have to look. And then again, you have to distinguish between a standard method or a own standard. So if you use an international standard, you don't have to make a validation, you just have to verify it. But for self-developed method, well, I explained the validation and Lorenz Sibensen as well, but there are some other aspects regarding the accreditation. What is about the equipment calibration? Do I have accredited calibration service provider? Do they have the accreditation? Are they available for me? Do I have to do it by my own? Do I have the qualified staff to make calibrations, not only self-tests, the real calibration to write a report? Do I have a how can I maintain the reliability? Do I have a maintenance plan? Do I have mechanics or electricians who are competent to maintain my equipment? Can I take part in proficiency or interlaboratory tests? Are they available? Do I have one who offers these tests? Do I have certified or own reference materials? Can I purchase them? Where can I purchase them? How will I monitor the competence of the laboratory staff? That is one of the new requests of the standard, to monitor permanently the qualification of the staff. Do I have qualified people for the validation and verification that usually can't be done by the laboratory staff? You have maybe the manager or the laboratory head who has to look for the validation and the verification. Are they qualified? Are the surrounding and premises appropriate, like air conditioner and so on? Can I estimate the measurement uncertainty? I have to do it for any accredited method, and I have to do it for complex tests like GCMS or GPC. It's quite difficult to estimate the measurement uncertainty. And last but not least, how will I deal with complaints? Do I have a procedure if the customer is not satisfied? How will I do that? In short words, am I able or am I in the position to fulfill all the requirements listed in ISO 17025 for a new method? So I have to go step by step through the requirements or the requests of the standard and have to watch if I can do it.
And typically, there should be some kind of a checklist, which includes all the issues that you have already mentioned, in order to proceed with them. Okay.
Yeah. Make an extract of the ISO standard and go step by step through this checklist and tick it if you can it. And what is to do if you can't do it? Will I do it? And do I have the possibility, the financial background to do it? And so on. That's what have to be clear.
Now we have already established the test method in the laboratory, and after a while, the test method is revised by the issuing organization, ISO, ASTM, or other organizations, and the method has been already verified, but there are new changes in the test method based on the revision of the organization. And it is important for the assessors that laboratories need to have a specified tasks. When a method is revised, they need to go through the changes, specify what resources do they need, what types of tasks should be added to their work instructions, and similar issues. May I have your comments about how laboratories should plan to apply the changes and how should deal with such revisions of test methods?
So, well, I think you need to have a procedure written down. Maybe a checklist step by step. At first, you have to be sure that you got the new standard. Maybe we in Germany have a distribution company who is the only one who distributes standards in Germany. And I think in other countries it will be in the same way. So maybe you can make a contract with them to get an information about all these new standards which are relevant for you. So if you receive a new edition of a standard, you have to read it carefully regarding the changes. Are they relevant for the results or for the execution? So you have to verify if you're still able to do that. Are there minor changes? Maybe the speed has changed or something else. That should not be the problem. I know it from the environmental stress crack resistance. There was a major change regarding the wetting agent, regarding the temperature, and everything has changed. So you have to watch, are you still able with your equipment to perform this test? If this check is positive, you have to maybe change your standard operation procedure. You have to train and inform the employees, and you should document that you have done it. The assessor might see that during the next assessment. If only minor changes are, so maybe they refer to other standards or some minor changes. So I would recommend to have a flexible accreditation. Here in Germany, we have 3 categories, 1, 2, and 3. And 3 means that you can use a new standard, a new edition of a standard without information to the accreditation body. But I think I will come later to these 3 steps of flexible accreditation, but I would suggest or recommend to do the flexible accreditation category 3 for each laboratory. So you can use always a new standard, but you have to verify if you're able to do that. That is the first thing. And you, of course, you need to be sure that you got information about the edition of a new standard.
We will come back to this flexible scope later. I prefer to have some detailed conversation with you about that. In terms of documentation, what the type of documentations are required to prove during an assessment, of course, that a laboratory has applied a new test method or a revised test method successfully? What should they have in their labs in order to prove that?
So if you use an own method, I explained before that there is a lot of effort to do. So there is a document from the DAKKS where is all this described. I don't know if other national accreditation bodies do have the same, but well, there is at first a description of the test method. Please describe detailed the single step from taking the sample until preparation of the test report. These single steps are written down in a standard operation procedure that's necessary. Then you need to prepare a validation plan. What needs to be validated? Which parameters are important and how will I proceed? So step by step, what is the plan, how to implement this new method? You will gain some raw data during this validation. Please keep them all. The assessor will see that so that he can follow the way how you have done it and which data were gained to write a report about that. And of course, check all for the new method relevant parameters, for instance, selectivity or working range, precision, detection limits are always necessary, maybe the robustness and the measurement uncertainty. And then write a report where you link all these data you find or you have found. And if your expectations were fulfilled, and then you have to approve this report and release the new test method, well, and publish it to the people. And of course, maybe you should inform your customer as well.
Mm-hmm.
So if this work has successfully done, so please send a request for extension to your national accreditation body, because they will have a following then an additional assessment to watch if all these work you have done are in accordance to the ISO standard 17025. If the auditor is satisfied and he finds all what he is looking for, and he is, he said that's okay, then the final, he will recommend the extension, and finally you will get a new certificate from your accreditation body. That is the step from starting making a plan how to do till an additional assessment for these new methods for the extension, and then you will hopefully receive a new certificate.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Let's go to this concept of flexible scope. First of all, I would like you to provide us with a definition or some explanation, because it is not very common in Iran, and our national accreditation body does not have any policy for accreditation of laboratories with flexible scope. But most of the accreditation bodies have some policies for flexible scope. After the definition of flexible scope, could you please let us know how these types of laboratories should handle the challenge of new methods introduction to their system? And because it might be a routine day-to-day job for them to introduce a new method to their routine task, and how they, what structures should be in place and how they should do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me first explain the three categories. I can just explain it for Germany. I do not know how it is dealt in other countries, in European countries or worldwide. I don't know. I just know the German system. So as I mentioned before, we have three different categories. The lowest level is category 3, where you can use always a new standard or a new edition of a standard without prior information to the accreditation body. So if you got a new edition, you have to verify if you can do it, and then you can implement it without information. Well, during the next assessment, you will write a new amendment to your certificate and send it to the accreditation body, and you will get a new printout with the new data. That is not possible for own created or developed methods. You can't apply accreditation step 3. But I will recommend to do it if you use always standard methods. I will strictly or strongly recommend to ask for these category 3 because it's just a cross in the request. You don't have
to interrupt you. This category 3 only applies to the revision of test methods, or you can replace ISO standard with the ASTM standard for the same method too.
Yes, you can replace a new edition that might be a different name. So where for shore hardness, there are existing 2 different ISO standards. So you can use another one with the same same method. If it's an ASTM standard or automobile rule or something else, you have to look if it's different. There are different measures. If it's really the same, if it refers to the same, and they tell it in the foreword, it refers to the ISO standard, then you can use it. If not, you have to inform the accreditation body that you want to implement the ASTM standard as well.
Okay.
So the next level is category 1. Here you can use new methods based on a national or international standard. If you have some other similar methods already accredited. For instance, if you have accreditation for the tensile test on rigid materials, and you have the accreditation flexible category 1, then you can use the standard, the tensile test for films as well. So without information to the accreditation body. So, or you can make minor changes. Or if you have an impact test like Sharpie, you can use an impact test for ISOT as well. But you only can use normalized or standardized methods. And the highest level is category 2, where you can use self-developed or modified methods. Then you have the freedom to implement a completely new method based on a standard. You can not invent something what was never heard before, but you can implement new methods or modified methods without prior information about that. To say it clear, you can implement an own developed method without category 2. But then you have to inform before you will implement it the accreditation body, and they will come for an assessment. With category 2, you can implement it without an additional assessment. That is the difference. But for accreditation, flexible accreditation category 2, it's a quite high hurdle. So you need to think about that, and you need some experience with accreditation. But I would recommend to discuss it with a contact person from your accreditation body. What is necessary for you? What is your task? What do you want to do? And they will gladly advise you which category is sensible for you.
Okay, what about the second part of my questions, the laboratories with flexible scope? How should deal with the challenge of applying and introduction of new test methods to their laboratory?
Would you repeat it, please?
My second part of my question is that when a laboratory is accredited with flexible scope, they should have a routine and day-to-day challenge of introduction of new test methods to their laboratories. Do these challenges different from ordinary labs without flexible scope? Because introduction of new test methods to the lab is something that happen in more frequent time.
You should have a procedure how you will implement a new method. That's necessary. Where you write down all these steps, which is necessary for regarding the flexible accreditation step you have. Then you have to write down the single steps, how to deal with that, what is necessary. But usually, if you have flexible accreditation category 3, I don't think that you need a procedure for that. Only for category 1 and 2, you need a detailed description how you work on this process. That's necessary. But in my experience, it's quite seldom that new methods are implemented or self-developed. It depends on the laboratory, but it's once per year or maybe it's not daily business to implement new test methods.
Thank you. My next question is that we use different terms when dealing with test methods, including selection, verification, validation, introduction, the subject of our interview today. Could you please briefly describe what these terms mean in general, and what are the order of doing them when a method needs to be applied in a laboratory?
Well, I think I explained main of these questions before. At first, you have to distinguish between the implementation of a standard test method based on a standard, or if you introduce a new method. The definitions of validations, verifications, Lawrence Stevenson explained it very detailed. And I think the main steps of this question I explained in my answers before. So are there any aspects which are not clarified before? Or?
No, everything is clarified, but the order is important for me. When we first we select the method and then we proceed with validation or verification, and if it is successful and we can confirm that we have the capability to perform the test method and good performance in the test method, then we will introduce and apply the test method in the laboratory. Am I right? First selection, then verification and validation, and then implementation and introduction.
Yeah. At first you have to select if you're able and if you're willing, and then you have to do the single steps. If you want to implement it, then you have to do these single steps. Verification for a standard method, validation for a self-developed method, with all these steps I mentioned before.
In some laboratories, especially the ones with flexible scope, the test methods might be recommended and chosen by the customer, and the customer is a key customer, as you mentioned, and introduction of a new test method is a routine practice in the laboratory, and time is also an important factor in that case. What are the considerations for a laboratory of applying test methods recommended by the customers in the laboratories?
Yeah. So if the customer asks for a certain procedure based on standard, or for an automotive role that is a standard as well, you just have to verify if you're able or willing to do that. That's the easiest way. Regarding the ability, please check if you have the equipment, the premises, the trained staff, the infrastructure for sampling collection and handling and so on. And can you fulfill the standard ISO 17025 for this method? That is what you have to ask yourself and to answer to the customers. Regarding the willingness, you have to evaluate the business factors I explained before. Regarding the response time, the equipment, the costs, the effort for calibration, and so on, and for proficiency tests, round robins, they are quite expensive, and you have to do it not once per year, but on a regular base, and and how important is the customer? That are the main things and thoughts you have to deal with to make the decision if you want to do it or if you don't want to do it. If you say to the customers, yes, that's interesting for me, I will support you, or no, sorry, we are not able to do that. And you are free to say that to the customer. We can't do that. So we have to, maybe you can give him an advice or who is able to do that. I often got the request from a customer, can you do this for us? Well, I'm looking. I look if I want to do it. If not, I can recommend another laboratory which is accredited who will do that. You can ask them. So maybe let me shortly summarize these.
Yes, because I am finished with my question. If there is anything that you would like to add to our conversation, the floor is yours. Please go on.
Yeah. So the implementation of a new procedure based on a norm or a standard rule is quite easy. You just need to verify the capability and check if you really want to offer this method. That's these steps you have to do always. For own procedures, a detailed validation is additionally necessary with all factors and parameters I explained before. The validation plan and all things you have to take into consideration. Then after the validation and or verification, you have to submit the request for extension to your national accreditation body. And after a successful assessment, you may use the new method in your accredited area. So that are, in short words, is a summary. The most important is to distinguish between a standard procedure and a developed and new procedure. And that is a lot of work you have to consider if you want it. So that's what I can tell you about the implementation of new methods.
Thank you very much, Mr. Knodel, for your time. It has been an honor for me and a good opportunity to meet you again, remotely, of course, but it has been a very nice discussion, and I'm sure that it will be very useful for our audience too. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. It was a pleasure for me to answer your question, to be your interview partner. All the best for you, and maybe we will meet again for an assessment in Iran.
Okay, let's hope so. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Have a nice day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.